The desert was merciless. Its sun pressed down like a hammer, flattening every shadow, scorching the earth until the very air shimmered in waves of heat. Clara Dawson staggered along a trail that wasn't really a trail at all, just the last memory of wagon wheels carving faint grooves in the sand before disappearing into the emptiness. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her shoes had blistered, her feet raw, her lips were cracked, and the corset wrapped around her torso squeezed the very breath from her lungs. The stagecoach was gone, burned to blackened wood and iron after the outlaws had descended like vultures. The memory still replayed in her mind. Gunshots, screams, the driver falling, her friend Sarah dragged into the dust. Clara had run, somehow slipping into the scrub brush, her heart hammering so loud she thought the men would hear it. She had survived, but only barely. Now, hours later, the weight of survival pressed cruelly upon her. Every breath was a rasp. Every thought was a fog. She reached down with trembling hands, tugging at the laces of her corset. It was a prison, one she had worn all her life because society demanded it. But here in the desert, society had no say. With a desperate cry, Clara pulled at the strings until the garment loosened. She slid it off, gasping as the air filled her lungs freely for the first time in hours. Her shawl followed, tossed into the dust, her pale skin exposed to the sun. She collapsed to her knees, tears burning her eyes. "Please," she whispered hoarsely to no one. "Please, someone help me." The desert gave no answer, only the whisper of wind stirring sand. She bent forward, head hanging, convinced this would be her grave. And then she felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. Her head snapped up, eyes squinting against the glare. At first she saw nothing but endless rock and sagebrush. Then out of the wavering heat a figure emerged, tall, silent, moving with the grace of a predator. Clara's breath caught. An Apache. Every story she had ever heard from the townsfolk thundered through her mind. Stories of raids, of women taken, of men scalped. Fear surged like lightning in her chest, but her body was too weak to run. She could only stare as the warrior drew closer. He was bare-chested, his skin bronze against the sunlight, his long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. His eyes, dark, sharp, unflinching, rested on her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. In one hand he carried a bow. A knife hung at his belt. Clara pressed her palms into the sand and tried to speak, but only a croak came out. "Please, help me." For a long, breathless moment he said nothing. He simply stood, watching her as if deciding whether she was worth saving or leaving to the desert's mercy. His gaze flicked to the discarded corset and shawl, then back to her flushed face. Finally he moved. Not toward her, but past her, heading toward the horizon as if she didn't exist. Desperation clawed at her throat. "Wait!" Her voice cracked, but it was loud enough to halt his steps. He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Clara's heart pounded. She had no pride left to cling to. On trembling knees, she lifted her hands in supplication. I'll die out here, please." Something in her voice, perhaps its rawness, perhaps its surrender, shifted the air between them. Slowly, the Apache walked back. He crouched before her, his movements fluid, controlled. From a pouch at his side, he drew a small water skin and held it out. Clara seized it with both hands, drinking greedily until she coughed. The water was warm, but to her it tasted sweeter than wine. Tears streaked her dusty cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. He said nothing, but his eyes softened just barely before he gestured for her to stand. She tried, but her legs buckled. Without hesitation, he slid an arm beneath her and lifted her to her feet. Clara gasped at the sudden closeness. He smelled of leather, smoke, and earth. She had never been held by anyone so strong, so steady. Her fear warred with a strange, inexplicable sense of safety. He half carried, half guided her toward a cluster of rocks that cast a narrow strip of shade. There he eased her down gently and stepped back, watching her again with that same silent intensity. For several minutes, Clara simply breathed, regaining strength. Then with effort, she met his gaze. Why are you helping me?" His lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. Not mockery, but something deeper. His voice, when it came, was low and resonant. "Desert. Kill quick, you, not strong." His English was broken, but his meaning was clear. Clara blinked. It startled her to hear him speak at all. "You saved me," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He tilted his head, considering. Then he replied, "Not yet." Her chest tightened at those words, both frightening and strangely comforting. Not yet. He wasn't promising her safety, only that he hadn't abandoned her to death. As the sun dipped lower, he busied himself gathering dry branches and striking flint. Soon a small fire crackled between them, though the heat of it seemed unnecessary in the desert air. Clara realized it wasn't for warmth, it was for protection. Predators prowled the night, and he was shielding her from them. She studied him as the firelight flickered over his features. There was strength carved into every line of his face, but also weariness, as though he carried burdens heavier than the bow on his back. She wanted to ask his name, but her courage faltered. Instead, she murmured, "I'm Clara." He looked at her for a long time, then finally said, "Taza." The name lingered in the air like a drumbeat. Strong, fierce, alive. Clara drew the discarded corset closer, holding it loosely in her lap. She thought of how she had taken it off in despair, pleading for help, and how in that moment of vulnerability this man had appeared. A stranger, an Apache, a man she had been taught to fear. But here, under the vast desert sky, he was her only hope. And something deep inside her whispered that his next move, whatever it would be, was about to change her life forever. The desert night fell quickly, cloaking the world in shadows and strange cries. Clara had never heard such sounds before. Coyotes yipping in the distance, the rustle of creatures in the sagebrush, the mournful hoot of an owl. Each sound sent a shiver through her already weary body. She sat close to the fire Taza had built, the flames painting her face in flickering gold. Her discarded corset lay beside her, a reminder of the society she had come from, the neat streets of Tucson, the stiff expectations of her father, the constant warnings about savages. Yet here she was, alive only because of the Apache warrior sitting across from her. Taza sat silently, cross-legged, his bow resting at his side, his dark eyes scanning the desert as though every shadow might leap to attack. He hadn't spoken since telling her his name, and Clara's thoughts churned in the silence. She wanted to ask him everything, why he had helped her, where he was taking her, what he thought of a lost woman begging for his aid, but the lump in her throat kept her quiet. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she whispered, Do you live out here alone?" His eyes flicked to hers, then back to the darkness. "Not alone, my people, near mountains." His English was careful, heavy with his accent. "But I walk alone." Clara nodded slowly. "A scout?" She guessed. He gave a short grunt, half agreement, half dismissal. Then, after a pause, he looked at her fully for the first time since the fire was lit. His gaze pierced her, sharp as flint. "You run from men." Her chest tightened. The memory of gunfire returned like thunder in her ears. "Outlaws," she whispered. "They attacked the stagecoach, killed the driver, killed others." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands against her eyes. "They wanted me alive." Taza's face darkened. He leaned forward slightly, the firelight throwing shadows over the angles of his cheekbones. "Why?" Clara hesitated. Her father's ranch. His stubborn refusal to sell his land. The threats whispered in town. She had pieced it together during her flight. "They wanted to use me," she admitted softly. "Force my father to give them our ranch." Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. They said I'd be their bargaining piece." Taza's jaw clenched. His silence carried more weight than words. Clara hugged her knees, staring into the fire. I thought I was safe on that coach." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Safe? There's no such thing, is there?" When he answered, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "Nowhere is safe. Not for you. Not for my people." Clara's head lifted. His eyes were no longer on her, but on the flames, his expression shadowed with memory. For the first time, she saw more than a warrior. She saw a man who carried wounds she could not see. "What happened to your people?" she asked gently. For a long while, he did not answer. She feared she had pushed too far. Then he spoke, voice like stone breaking. "Soldiers came. Promises made. Then broken. Land taken. Families killed. My brother." His voice trailed off, the fire snapping in the silence. Clara's heart ached. She had grown up hearing settlers' stories of Apache raids, of savagery and violence, but never had she thought of what might have provoked them. Looking at Taza now, she felt shame for how one-sided those stories had been. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Taza's gaze flicked to her again, as though testing her sincerity. At last, He gave a slight nod, acknowledging her words without softening. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different, not heavy with fear, but tentative, like the fragile first threads of a bridge between them. Clara pulled the Apache blanket he had given her tighter around her shoulders. "Will you take me back to town?" His expression hardened. "Town full of your men, soldiers, they see me. They shoot," she bit her lip. He was right. To bring him into Tucson would be to paint a target on his back, yet she could not survive alone. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Then what will you do with me?" He studied her carefully, his eyes unreadable. Then he said simply, "Keep you alive." The bluntness of the answer made her stomach flutter strangely. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. The fire crackled between them. Slowly, Clara stretched out on the sand, exhaustion weighing down her limbs. She tried to sleep, but the desert's chill crept into her bones. She shivered violently, teeth chattering. Without a word, Taza rose and draped another blanket over her. His hand brushed her shoulder briefly, warm and steady before withdrawing. For a moment, she almost reached for it, but the thought made her flush hot, and she pulled the blanket tighter instead. When she opened her eyes, she found him standing a short distance away, silhouetted against the starlit horizon, watching the desert with the patience of a hawk. He was guarding her, protecting her, and for the first time since the stagecoach attack, Clara felt the faint stirrings of safety. Not because of walls or lawmen, but because of him. By dawn, the desert shimmered under pale light. Clara stirred awake to the smell of roasted rabbit. Taza had caught and cooked it before she had even opened her eyes. She sat up, startled at the offering he placed in her hands. "You eat," he said firmly. She hesitated, then tore off a small bite. The meat was smoky, surprisingly tender. She hadn't realized how hollow her stomach felt until the food touched her tongue. She devoured it greedily, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. When she looked up, she caught him watching her, not with judgment, but with quiet amusement. "What?" she asked, embarrassed. "You eat like warrior," he said simply. A startled laugh escaped her, the first laugh since the attack. "Well, I suppose I'll have to be one if I want to survive." His lips curved in something very near a smile. For a fleeting moment, Clara forgot she was supposed to fear him. She forgot the world outside, the outlaws hunting her, the townsfolk who would condemn him. In that instant, there was only the two of them, sharing food in the wilderness, bound by survival. And in the unspoken space between them, something delicate began to grow. Not trust, not yet, but something like it. A fragile, uneasy alliance. The desert sun had risen high again, burning away the cool traces of dawn. Clara and Taza moved slowly through a narrow canyon, its towering red walls giving them both shade and a sense of concealment. Clara's legs ached from walking, but she bit back her complaints. She had chosen to follow him, and every instinct told her that without him she would already be dead. Taza walked ahead, silent as the wind, his bow slung across his back, a knife at his side. Every so often he would pause, crouching low, studying tracks in the dust or listening to the distant echo of the canyon. His movements were deliberate, precise. Clara marveled at how he seemed part of the earth itself, listening, watching, breathing with it. Finally, after hours of trudging, they came to a small spring hidden between boulders. Clear water trickled down the stone, collecting in a shallow pool. Clara gasped in relief, sinking to her knees to drink. The coolness revived her, washing away some of her fear. She splashed water on her face, then sat back with a sigh. Taza watched her for a moment before kneeling beside the pool. He cupped his hands, drinking slowly, methodically. Clara studied him, the proud set of his shoulders, the scar across his left arm, the lines of weariness etched into his face. He was young, perhaps only a few years older than she, yet he carried himself as though he had lived 100 lives. When he caught her staring, Clara flushed and looked away. But the silence between them had grown heavy, full of unspoken questions. At last she dared to break it. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. Taza was still for a long moment. Then he sat back on his heels, eyes narrowing as though searching for the right words in her language. "Because desert take life fast. You were alone. I could not walk past." His answer was simple, but Clara sensed there was more behind it. "But don't you hate us?" She pressed gently. "The settlers. My people." His jaw tightened, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. Many hate. Soldiers burned my village, took land, killed my brother. Your people bring much death. His words were blunt, but his tone carried no rage, only sorrow. Clara swallowed hard. The weight of his pain pressed against her chest. She had grown up hearing only one side of the story. Settlers were brave, Apaches were ruthless. But looking at him now, she wondered how much truth had been buried beneath those tales. My father always said the Apache were dangerous. She admitted quietly. But maybe it's because he never saw what they lost. Taza's eyes snapped back to hers, sharp and searching. For a long time, he simply looked at her, as though trying to decide if she truly meant what she said. Then slowly he gave the faintest nod. Encouraged, Clara continued. The outlaws who attacked the stagecoach, they wanted me because of my father's land. He refused to sell it. He said no man should ever force him off it. She gave a bitter laugh. And yet, isn't that what settlers have done to your people? The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Clara half expected him to lash out, but instead, something softened in his expression, as though her honesty had struck a chord. Yes, he said simply. They sat in silence for a time, the only sound the trickling of the spring. Clara felt as though a veil had lifted between them. Not fully, but enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the warrior's mask. When the wind shifted, carrying a chill, Clara shivered. Taza noticed immediately. Without a word, he pulled a blanket from his pack and draped it around her shoulders. His hand brushed her arm, just for an instant, but it was enough to send a strange warmth racing through her body. She looked up at him, her lips parting to speak, but no words came. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." His gaze lingered on hers, dark and unreadable. Then he turned away, settling beside the fire he had kindled with practiced ease. Clara sat close, letting the flames chase away her chill. As the fire crackled, she found herself studying him again, not with fear this time, but with something else, admiration, curiosity, a pull she could not explain. "You've lost so much," she murmured. "And still, you protect me, why?" Taza's eyes flicked toward her, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thought he would ignore her question. Then he said quietly, "Because you look at me, not as enemy." That is rare, her breath caught. She hadn't realized how much it meant to him. That small act of seeing him as a man, not just a savage. Something shifted inside Clara then. She thought of how he had carried her when she collapsed, how he had guarded her through the night, how he had given her water when she begged for it. All her life she had been taught to see Apaches as dangerous. Yet this man had shown her more honor and restraint than any outlaw, or even many men in town. Her heart thudded strangely in her chest. She wanted to thank him, to reach out and touch his hand. But the fear of breaking the fragile bond between them held her still. Instead, she whispered, "When I was little, I used to dream about heroes, men who would come riding in when I was in trouble." She looked at him with a tremulous smile. "I never thought one would be Apache." For the first time, Taza's lips curved, just slightly, but it was there. A smile. "Heroes do not exist," he said quietly. "Only people who fight to survive." Clara felt her eyes sting. Maybe he was right, but to her in this vast and merciless desert, he was more than a survivor. He was her protector. That night, as they sat by the fire, Clara leaned against the blanket he had given her. The flames cast shadows across Taza's face, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the quiet sorrow in his eyes. Without realizing it, she let her head rest lightly against his shoulder. He stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed, allowing her to stay. In the silence of the desert, beneath the blanket of stars, a fragile intimacy grew between them. They were still strangers, still bound by mistrust and differences, but in the beating of their hearts, in the warmth of their closeness, something new was taking root. It was not yet love, not yet trust, but it was the beginning, a secret of the heart whispered only to the night. The days bled together in the desert. Clara and Taza moved cautiously, always keeping to the canyons, drinking from hidden springs, sharing food he caught with traps or his bow. For Clara, each step away from the stagecoach felt like a step into a new world, one where survival meant more than proper manners or fine dresses, but danger had not forgotten her. By the third day, Taza noticed tracks in the sand, fresh ones, heavy boot prints. Clara's blood turned cold the moment he crouched low, pressing his palm to the earth. "Men," he said simply. Her voice trembled. The outlaws. His dark eyes lifted to hers, grim and certain. They hunt you. Clara's stomach twisted. She had hoped the men had taken what they wanted from the coach and disappeared. But no, she was too valuable. She was still their prize. Taza led her deeper into the canyons, his movements swift, purposeful. Clara followed, her fear lending her strength. Yet no matter how far they went, the sense of being pursued gnawed at her. The air itself seemed to tighten, heavy with threat. That night they made camp in a narrow ravine. The fire was small, shielded from view. Clara tried to eat the rabbit Taza had roasted, but her stomach rejected it. Her hands trembled as she set the food aside. "They'll find us, won't they?" she whispered. Taza studied her across the fire. His expression was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Yes," he said. Then after a pause he added, "But they will not take you." Something in his voice, the steel, the certainty, stirred both fear and courage within her. She wrapped his blanket around her shoulders and prayed silently that he was right. They came at dawn. Clara had just opened her eyes when the sound of footsteps echoed off the canyon walls. Shouts followed. Men's voices, rough, jeering, cruel. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Taza was already moving. In one swift motion he seized his bow, notched an arrow, and pressed a finger to his lips for silence. Clara crouched low, trembling, watching as shadows stretched across the rocks. 3 men appeared first. Outlaws in dust-stained coats, rifles in their hands. "There she is," one shouted, spotting Clara. His grin was vicious. "Boss said she's worth more alive. Don't let her slip this time." The words sent ice through her veins. They wanted her. They would drag her back, use her against her father, break her spirit. Taza loosed his arrow. It struck the first man square in the chest, sending him tumbling back. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded, bullets ricocheting off the canyon walls. Taza moved like a storm, silent, swift, deadly. He loosed another arrow, ducked behind a boulder, then lunged with his knife when a man got too close. Clara pressed against the rocks, her body shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, to let him fight. But when she saw Taza grappling with 2 men at once, saw blood bloom across his shoulder from a grazing shot, something inside her snapped. No more helplessness, no more running. Her gaze fell on a fallen rifle. Hands shaking, she scrambled for it. The wood was heavy, the metal cold. She remembered her father teaching her once, long ago, how to hold a gun, though he'd laughed, saying a lady would never need to use one. Well, she needed it now. Clara lifted the rifle, aimed at the outlaw, raising his pistol at Taza's back, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the canyon. The man spun, dropped his weapon, and crumpled. Her whole body shook from the recoil, the sound ringing in her ears. She had killed a man. The horror of it crashed into her, but there was no time to think. Another outlaw rushed forward, snarling, and Clara raised the rifle again, her teeth clenched. Beside her, Taza fought with the ferocity of a mountain lion. He disarmed one man with a slash of his knife, then slammed him into the rocks. His movements were precise, brutal yet controlled. He fought not for bloodlust but for survival, for her. The last 2 outlaws, seeing their numbers dwindling, cursed and fled, their boots pounding into the distance. The canyon fell silent, except for Clara's ragged breathing and the crackle of the dying fire. Her hands trembled violently. The rifle slipped from her grasp, clattering to the ground. She stared at her shaking fingers, her heart racing. Taza approached her slowly. Blood trickled from a wound on his arm, but his eyes were steady, unwavering. He crouched before her, his hand closing gently over hers to still the tremors. "You fought," he said simply. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. I killed a man," her voice broke. "I never thought I could." His grip tightened, grounding her. "You saved me," her breath caught. She looked into his eyes, dark, fierce, and yet softer now, filled with something she could not name. The tears spilled over, sliding down her cheeks. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Courage is not without fear," Taza said quietly. "It is choosing to fight even with it." His words sank into her like an anchor, steadying the storm inside her. She realized then that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing, trembling, and choosing anyway. She reached up with trembling fingers and touched the wound on his arm. "You're hurt," he gave a faint smile. Not bad, but she could see the blood, the rawness of the wound. Her heart twisted at the thought of losing him. Without hesitation, she tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it firmly to his arm, binding it as best she could. Their eyes met as she worked. For a moment, the world shrank to just them, the brush of her hands against his skin, the warmth of his gaze holding hers. When she finished, she sat back, exhausted, her breath still uneven. "You protected me," she murmured, "and I couldn't just stand by." "You did not," he said firmly. "You chose." The weight of his words settled over her. She had chosen, not just survival, but to stand with him, to fight beside him. And in that choice, something had changed. Clara realized she could no longer see herself as a helpless rancher's daughter waiting to be saved. She was part of this now, part of him. As the sun rose higher, its light spilling into the canyon, she sat beside Taza, her hand brushing his. He did not pull away. And in that quiet, blood-stained dawn, Clara understood something with startling clarity. Her life was no longer her own. It was bound to his, by courage, by survival, by something deeper she dared not name yet. The desert stretched endlessly behind them, yet Clara felt that part of her heart had been left in those canyons, among the blood and dust where she had chosen to fight. Days passed as Taza guided her northward, his injured arm bound in the strip of her skirt, his movement slower now but no less steady. Clara stayed close, no longer trailing timidly behind but walking beside him step for step. Each day she caught herself watching him, his silent strength, the way he moved like he belonged to the earth itself. At night, when they camped beneath the stars, she would lie awake, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath, feeling strangely safe despite the wildness around them. Yet she knew the world beyond the desert would not see him as she did. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, stern and immovable. Never trust an Apache. They're killers, thieves, less than men. But what did her father know of honor, of sacrifice, of courage? She did. She had lived it. By the 5th day, the land began to change. The rocky canyons gave way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite. Clara recognized the ridge in the distance, the line of trees marking the Dawson Ranch. Her heart lurched. Home. She should have felt relief, but instead she felt torn in two. Taza stopped at the edge of a bluff, scanning the horizon with hawk-like eyes. "You're home," he said, simply pointing. Clara swallowed hard. Yes, for a long moment neither moved. The silence between them felt heavier than any words. Finally, Clara whispered, "What will you do?" He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the land. "Leave, go back to mountains." Her chest tightened. She had known, of course. He could not walk openly into her world. He would be hunted, despised. And yet the thought of parting from him now felt unbearable. "You saved me," she said, her voice trembling, more than once. "I can't just let you walk away." Taza's eyes flicked to hers, dark and unreadable. "Your people will not accept me." "I accept you," she whispered fiercely. For the first time, his stoic mask faltered. A flicker of something raw crossed his face. Longing, pain, hope all tangled together. He reached out, his calloused hand brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The simple touch sent fire through her veins. Before either could speak, the sound of shouting carried on the wind. Men's voices. Clara turned sharply to see a group of ranch hands riding up from the valley, rifles slung over their shoulders. Her father at their head, panic surged. "They can't see you," she hissed. "They'll shoot!" Taza straightened, his bow already in his hand. "I go," he said, voice clipped, but Clara grabbed his arm. "No, please, just let me talk to them." Her father rode up first, reining in his horse with a sharp yank. His eyes widened at the sight of her, alive, standing at the ridge. "Clara!" he shouted, his voice cracking. He leapt down from the saddle, pulling her into a crushing embrace. "Thank God, you're safe." She clung to him for a moment, her throat tightening. But then his gaze shifted, hardening as it fell on Taza. "What in hell's name is he doing here?" Her father growled, shoving Clara behind him as the ranch hands raised their rifles. "Savage, no!" Clara cried, darting forward. She planted herself between Taza and the leveled guns, her arms spread wide. "Don't you dare. He saved me. If it weren't for him, I'd be dead." Her father's face twisted with disbelief. "Saved you? You expect me to believe an Apache didn't finish what those outlaws started?" Clara's voice rose, trembling but unyielding. "He fought for me. He bled for me. He gave me water when I begged for help. Father, I am alive because of him." The men shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. Taza stood motionless, bow lowered, his expression unreadable. But his eyes never left Clara's face. Her father clenched his fists. "Clara, step aside. He'll bring nothing but trouble to this ranch." Clara turned to face him, her voice steady now. I won't let you harm him. You may not understand, but I do. He is not our enemy. He is my protector. My friend." Her voice faltered, then steadied again. "And more than that, my heart is his." A stunned silence fell. The ranch hands lowered their rifles slightly, unsure. Her father's jaw dropped, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. "You can't mean that," he hissed. "I do," Clara said firmly. She turned to Taza, her eyes shining. "I won't deny what I feel. Not anymore." For the first time, Taza looked shaken. His chest rose and fell, his eyes glimmering with something deeper than words. Slowly, he stepped forward, close enough that only Clara could hear his whisper. "If you choose this, your life will change." Clara's lips trembled into a smile. "It already has." The days that followed were not easy. Her father railed, tried to forbid it, even threatened to send Taza away by force. But Clara stood firm, stronger than she had ever been. Slowly, reluctantly, her father saw the truth, that without the Apache warrior, his daughter would not be standing before him. Respect was not given easily, but it began to take root, grudging and fragile. Clara worked tirelessly to bridge the divide, proving with each day that her bond with Taza was not fleeting. She helped with ranch chores, no longer the fragile daughter but a woman shaped by fire and desert. And Taza, though he kept his distance from most of the ranch hands, never once faltered in protecting her. Whispers spread through town. Of course, sharp tongues wagging about the rancher's daughter and her Apache savior. But Clara held her head high. She had faced death, fear, and judgment. Gossip was nothing compared to that. At night, when the stars blanketed the sky, she and Taza would walk the edges of the ranch together. Words were often unnecessary. A glance, a touch of hands, the steady beat of their footsteps side by side. These were the language of their hearts. One evening, Clara remembered the moment she had first torn off her corset in the desert, gasping for life, begging for help. She turned to Taza, her eyes soft. "That moment changed everything," she whispered. "If I hadn't, I might never have found you." Taza's arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her close. "No," he said quietly. "You found yourself first. Then you found me." Her heart swelled, tears burning her eyes, and beneath the endless sky she kissed him. Gentle, fierce, full of promise. In the end, love had not erased the differences between them, but it had built a bridge where none had stood before. Clara Dawson, the rancher's daughter, and Taza, the Apache warrior, had defied the desert, the outlaws, and the weight of two worlds. And though the future would test them, one truth was unshakable. The moment she had taken it off, pleading for his help had not only saved her life, it had given her a love that would change it forever.